When she walked into his apartment at midnight with a key he never gave her, David thought it was a mistake. He was wrong. It was a 3-year plan. David couldn't sleep again. It had been 3 weeks since he moved into this new apartment downtown, and every night felt the same. He would lie in bed staring at the ceiling until his eyes hurt, then give up and sit at his small wooden desk near the window. Tonight was no different. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. David had papers spread across his desk, work reports that needed to be finished by morning. His boss had been understanding about everything he was going through, but patience only lasted so long. He needed to focus and get these done. Outside his window, the city never really slept. Streetlights cast long shadows on the empty sidewalk below. A few cars passed by every now and then, their headlights briefly lighting up his room before disappearing into the night. The building he lived in was old, built sometime in the 1960s. The walls were thin, and he could hear his neighbors going about their evening routines. Mrs. Rodriguez lived next door with her 2 cats. She worked late shifts at the local diner, and usually came home around 11:30. David had gotten used to hearing her keys jingling in the hallway and her soft footsteps as she unlocked her door. It was actually comforting in a way, knowing someone else was awake during these lonely hours. On the other side lived an elderly man named Mr. Thompson, who watched television until very late. David could hear the faint sound of old movies playing through the walls. Sometimes he would recognize the dialogue from classic films his father used to watch when he was a child. It made him feel less alone in this big, unfamiliar city. David picked up his pen and tried to concentrate on the financial reports in front of him. Numbers and charts filled the pages, but his mind kept wandering. 3 months ago, his life had been completely different. He was married, living in a house with a backyard, planning weekend trips and thinking about the future. Now he was alone in a 1-bedroom apartment starting over at 32 years old. The divorce had been messy and painful, not because of fighting or anger, but because of all the sadness and disappointment. 2 people who once loved each other had simply grown apart, and no amount of trying could bring back what they had lost. His ex-wife Lisa had kept the house. It was fair. She had put more money toward the down payment, and David didn't want to fight about it. He just wanted to move on and heal. He glanced at the clock on his desk. It was already past midnight. The coffee he had made earlier was now cold, but he took a sip anyway. The bitter taste reminded him that he was awake when the rest of the world was sleeping. His eyes felt heavy, but his mind was still racing with thoughts about work, money, and the uncertain future ahead. David heard the familiar sound of keys in the hallway. It was probably Mrs. Rodriguez coming home from her shift. He listened to the footsteps approaching, expecting to hear them stop at her door, but they didn't stop. They continued past her apartment, past Mr. Thompson's door, and stopped right outside his own apartment. His heart started beating faster. Maybe it was someone visiting one of his neighbors. Maybe they were lost or confused about which apartment they were looking for. David sat very still, listening carefully. The hallway was old and the lighting wasn't great, so people sometimes got mixed up about apartment numbers. Then he heard it, the soft click of a key being inserted into a lock. His lock. David froze. His pen stopped moving across the paper. His breath caught in his throat. Someone was unlocking his front door. But that was impossible. He had the only key. The landlord had given him just 1 key when he signed the lease, and he had been meaning to get a spare made but hadn't gotten around to it yet. The sound of the door opening reached his ears. It was gentle, careful, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping person. David's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe the landlord had let himself in, but it was after midnight. No landlord would come this late unless it was an emergency. And if it was an emergency, they would have knocked first or called ahead. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe his key worked on another apartment by accident, and someone was coming home to what they thought was their own place. David had heard of that happening in older buildings where the locks weren't always properly changed between tenants. But deep down he knew something was wrong. Very wrong. The footsteps inside his apartment were soft but deliberate. Whoever was there knew exactly where they were going. They weren't stumbling around in the dark like someone who had entered the wrong apartment by mistake. They were moving through his living room with purpose, avoiding the coffee table and the chair where he usually sat to watch television. David's hands started shaking slightly. He reached for his phone, which was charging next to his desk. Should he call the police? But what if he was wrong? What if there was an innocent explanation? He would feel foolish calling 911 over nothing, The footsteps moved closer to his bedroom area. David lived in a studio apartment, so there weren't many places to go. The main room served as both living room and bedroom, with his bed pushed against one wall and his desk near the window. The kitchen was just a small area with basic appliances, and there was one bathroom. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure whoever was in his apartment could hear it. David tried to think rationally. Maybe he should call out and ask who was there. Maybe he should make his presence known, and whoever it was would realize their mistake and leave. But something kept him silent. Some instinct told him to stay quiet and see what happened next. The footsteps had stopped just outside his direct line of sight. David realized he was holding his breath. Then she appeared in the doorway and David's world turned upside down. David's mouth went completely dry. Standing in his doorway was Rachel, his ex-wife's younger sister. She looked exactly the same as she had at family gatherings. Confident, mysterious, and somehow always in control of every situation. But seeing her here in his apartment at past midnight made absolutely no sense at all. Rachel smiled at him like this was the most normal thing in the world. Like she had every right to be standing there. She was wearing a long, dark coat that reached almost to her knees, and her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. In the dim light from his desk lamp, her eyes seemed to sparkle with some kind of secret knowledge. "Hello, David," she said softly, her voice calm and steady. "Don't look so surprised." David stared at her, his brain struggling to process what was happening. During his marriage to Lisa, Rachel had always been the wild one in the family. She was 3 years younger than Lisa, but seemed older in many ways. She had this way of looking at people that made them feel like she could see right through them. At family dinners, she would sit quietly and observe everyone, occasionally making comments that were either very funny or slightly uncomfortable. "Rachel," David finally managed to say, "what are you doing here? How did you get in?" She stepped further into his apartment, looking around like she was inspecting the place. Her eyes moved from his unmade bed to the pile of clothes on the chair, to the stack of books on his nightstand. David felt exposed, like she was judging his new living situation and finding it lacking. "This place is smaller than I expected," Rachel said, ignoring his questions. "But it's cozy. Very bachelor pad. Very starting over fresh." She walked over to his desk and picked up one of the family photos he still had displayed. A picture from last Christmas where everyone was smiling and pretending to be happy. "Rachel, seriously, how did you get in here?" David asked again, his voice stronger this time. The shock was wearing off, replaced by confusion and growing concern. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a silver key, holding it up so he could see it clearly. "Lisa gave this to me," she said simply. "Back when you two were still trying to work things out. She was worried about you living alone. Wanted someone to check on you from time to time." David felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. Lisa had never mentioned giving Rachel a key. In fact, during their marriage, Lisa had often complained about her sister's unpredictable behavior and tendency to show up unannounced. It seemed completely out of character for her to trust Rachel with something like this. "When did she give you that?" David asked. "Oh, months ago," Rachel said casually, slipping the key back into her pocket. She was going through one of her worried phases, you know how she gets. Always thinking the worst is going to happen to people she cares about. Rachel began unbuttoning her coat, moving slowly and deliberately. Underneath, she was wearing a simple black sweater and jeans, nothing unusual or inappropriate. But something about the way she was making herself comfortable in his space felt wrong. "I've been checking on you," she continued, hanging her coat over the back of his desk chair. "Making sure you're adjusting okay to single life. It's a big change, you know, going from married couple to living alone in a new city." David's mind was reeling. "You've been checking on me? What does that mean exactly?" Rachel smiled again. That same mysterious smile that had always made him slightly uncomfortable at family gatherings. "Just keeping an eye on things. Making sure you're eating properly, sleeping okay, not getting into any trouble." She walked over to his small kitchen area and opened the refrigerator like she owned the place. "You need to buy more food," she said, surveying the nearly empty shelves. "Takeout containers and energy drinks aren't a proper diet for a grown man." The casual way she went through his things made David's skin crawl. This wasn't normal behavior, even for someone who was supposedly checking on a family member. Rachel was acting like she had been in his apartment many times before, like she knew exactly where everything was. "How many times have you been here?" David asked, dreading the answer. A few times, Rachel said vaguely, closing the refrigerator and moving to his bathroom. She peeked inside like she was conducting an inspection. Your building's security isn't very good, by the way. The front door lock is broken half the time, and most of your neighbors don't pay attention to who comes and goes. David felt violated. The thought of Rachel coming and going from his apartment while he was at work, going through his things, observing his private life, made him feel sick. But at the same time, part of him wondered if Lisa really had asked her to do this. His ex-wife did tend to worry about people, and the divorce had been hard on everyone. Does Lisa know you're here right now? David asked. Rachel paused in her examination of his apartment and looked at him directly. Lisa has her own problems to worry about. She's dating someone new now, did you know that? Some guy from her yoga class. They seem happy together. The information hit David like a punch to the stomach. He had been hoping that maybe he and Lisa could work things out eventually, that their separation was just temporary. Hearing that she had moved on so quickly was painful, but the way Rachel delivered the news made it worse. There was something almost cruel in her tone, like she enjoyed being the one to tell him. I'm happy for her, David lied, trying to keep his voice steady. Are you? Rachel asked, tilting her head to study his face. Because you don't look happy. You look hurt and lonely and maybe a little bit angry. David realized that Rachel had been watching him very carefully, probably for longer than he knew. The way she read his emotions so easily was disturbing. It felt like she had been studying him, learning his reactions and weaknesses. I think you should go, David said firmly. This is inappropriate, Rachel. You can't just let yourself into my apartment whenever you want. But Rachel didn't move toward the door. Instead, she sat down on his bed, making herself even more comfortable. We need to talk, David. There are things you don't know about your marriage, about why it really ended. Things Lisa never told you. David's heart started pounding again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was dread. David stared at Rachel, his heart beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. What do you mean things Lisa never told me? Rachel crossed her legs and settled back against his pillows like she belonged there. Sit down, David. You're going to want to hear this. I'll stand, thanks, David said, staying near his desk. Something about this whole situation felt wrong, and he wanted to be ready to move if he needed to. Rachel shrugged. Suit yourself, but what I'm about to tell you might be shocking. She paused, looking at him with those intense eyes. I know a lot more about you than you realize. I know you eat cereal for dinner on Thursday nights when you're too tired to cook. I know you practice guitar around 2 in the morning when you can't sleep. I know you bought those new running shoes last month, but you've only worn them twice. David felt his blood turn cold. These weren't things that Lisa could have told her. These were things that had happened after the divorce, after he moved to this apartment. How do you know that? I've been watching you, Rachel said simply, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Not in a creepy way, she added quickly, seeing the look on his face. I was worried about you. Lisa was worried too before she got distracted by her new boyfriend. Watching me how? David's voice came out quieter than he intended. Rachel pointed toward his window. See that building across the street? The red brick one with the fire escape? I've been renting apartment 4B for about 2 months now. It has a perfect view of your place. David turned to look out his window. The building she was talking about was old, maybe even older than his own. He had noticed lights in the windows at night but never paid much attention. The thought that someone had been watching him from there, documenting his daily routine, made his skin crawl. You've been spying on me for 2 months? David asked, his voice rising. Not spying, Rachel corrected. Observing. Making sure you were okay. And honestly, David, you haven't been okay. You barely eat real food. You stay up too late working. You don't seem to have made any friends since moving here. Someone needed to keep an eye on you. David ran his hands through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. Rachel, this is insane. You can't just watch people without their permission. That's stalking. Don't be dramatic, Rachel said, waving her hand dismissively. I was helping. Do you know how many times I wanted to come over and cook you a proper meal? Or suggest you get some better curtains for privacy? Your neighbors can see right into your apartment too, you know. The mention of curtains made David realize something horrible. If Rachel could see into his apartment from across the street, that meant she had seen everything. His private moments, his bad days when he cried about the divorce, the times he talked to himself or sang along to music. She had been watching his most vulnerable moments like they were a television show. "This is sick," David said, backing toward his door. "You need to leave right now and you need to stop this obsessive behavior." Rachel's expression changed. The fake concern disappeared, replaced by something colder. "Obsessive? David, I've been taking care of you. Do you think it was a coincidence that your favorite coffee shop started selling those blueberry muffins you like? I suggested it to the manager. Or that your landlord fixed your heater so quickly last month. I called him and told him you were having problems." David felt like the world was tilting. "You did what?" "I've been looking out for you in ways you don't even realize," Rachel continued. "When you got sick 3 weeks ago, I'm the one who had groceries delivered to your building. The delivery guy said they were from a friend, remember?" "That was me." David did remember. He had been confused about the mysterious grocery delivery, but assumed it was from a coworker or maybe even Lisa. He had been grateful at the time, touched that someone cared enough to help him when he was feeling terrible with the flu. "And last weekend when you went to that new restaurant downtown, I made sure they had a table available for you. I called ahead and made a reservation under your name." "Stop," David said, holding up his hands. "Just stop talking. This is crazy, Rachel. This is not normal behavior." Rachel stood up from his bed, her movements slow and deliberate. "What's not normal is how Lisa treated you during your marriage. What's not normal is how she made you feel like everything was your fault when really, she was the one who gave up." "Don't talk about Lisa," David warned. "Why not? She's not here to defend herself, is she? She's too busy with yoga guy to care about what happens to you." Rachel walked closer to him, and David found himself pressed against the door. "But I care, David, I've always cared." The way she said it made David's stomach turn. There was something possessive in her tone, something that went way beyond family concern or friendship. "I need you to leave," David said firmly. "Right now." "We're not finished talking," Rachel replied. "You need to know the truth about why your marriage really ended. It wasn't because you grew apart. It wasn't because of communication problems or different goals. It ended because Lisa never really understood you the way I do." David reached for his phone again, but Rachel was faster. She moved between him and his desk, blocking his access to it. "I know things about you that she never knew," Rachel continued. "Like how you hum that old song your father used to sing when you're doing dishes. Or how you check your email exactly 3 times before bed every night. Or how you still sleep on the left side of the bed even though there's no one next to you anymore." Each detail she mentioned was like a knife twisting in his chest. These were private, intimate things that no one should know unless they lived with him. The fact that Rachel had been cataloging his behavior from across the street was beyond disturbing. "I know you cry sometimes," Rachel said softly. "Usually on Sunday nights when you're thinking about how different your life is now compared to a year ago. I've seen you sitting by that window looking so sad and lost." "Stop it," David whispered. "I know you still have Lisa's picture in your wallet, even though you took down all the photos in your apartment. I know you almost called her last Tuesday night but changed your mind at the last second. I know you ordered pizza from that place you two used to like, thinking it would make you feel better. But it just made you feel worse." David felt tears starting to form in his eyes. Rachel was describing his lowest, most private moments with surgical precision. The loneliness, the regret, the desperate attempts to feel connected to his old life. She had witnessed all of it. "How could you watch someone going through that and not feel disgusted with yourself?" David asked. Rachel's expression softened, but not in a way that comforted him. It was the kind of softness that felt dangerous, like a predator trying to appear gentle before striking. "Because I care about you, David, more than Lisa ever did, and I'm going to prove it to you." David realized he was trapped. Rachel was between him and his phone, between him and the front door. She was smaller than him, but something about her energy felt threatening, unpredictable. He needed to find a way to get her out of his apartment before this situation got any worse. But Rachel wasn't finished with her revelations yet. She had saved the worst for last. Rachel moved closer to David's bookshelf and started picking up his personal items one by one. She handled them like she had every right to touch his things, examining each object with the attention of someone who had been thinking about them for a long time. "You want to know why your marriage really fell apart?" Rachel asked, picking up a small wooden box that David's father had given him years ago. "It wasn't because you and Lisa grew apart naturally. It wasn't because of work stress or money problems or any of the things you've been telling yourself." David watched her fingers trace the edges of the wooden box. His father had made it himself in his garage workshop, and it was one of David's most treasured possessions. Seeing Rachel handle it so casually made him angry. "Put that down," David said. Rachel ignored him and opened the box, looking at the old coins and ticket stubs David kept inside. "You save everything, don't you? Movie tickets, concert stubs, even that napkin from the restaurant where you had your first date with Lisa." She held up the faded napkin with a smile. "How romantic. Too bad she never appreciated that side of you." "How do you know what's in there?" David demanded. "I've been in your apartment several times while you were at work," Rachel said matter-of-factly. "I needed to understand who you really are, not just the version of you that Lisa complained about at family dinners." David felt sick. The thought of Rachel going through his private belongings, reading his personal papers, looking at his photos was horrifying. But what scared him more was how calm she seemed about it, like breaking into someone's home was perfectly normal behavior. "You had no right to do that," David said. "I had every right," Rachel replied, closing the box and setting it back on the shelf. "Someone needed to know the real you. Lisa certainly didn't. Do you want to know what she used to say about you when you weren't around?" David didn't want to know, but Rachel continued anyway. "She said you were boring. She said you never wanted to do anything exciting or spontaneous. She said you were too predictable, too safe." Rachel moved to his desk and picked up the framed photo from Christmas again, but I knew she was wrong. I could see the real you even when she couldn't. The words hurt, but David tried not to let it show. He had suspected that Lisa felt that way toward the end of their marriage, but hearing it confirmed was still painful. "That doesn't give you the right to spy on me," David said. Rachel laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Spy on you? David, I was trying to save your marriage. I was trying to help Lisa see what she was about to throw away." "What do you mean?" Rachel sat down in his desk chair and spun it around to face him. "I mean, I tried to fix things between you two. I tried to make Lisa remember why she fell in love with you in the first place. I would suggest date ideas to her, remind her of your good qualities, encourage her to be more patient with you." David frowned. "That doesn't sound like saving a marriage. That sounds like manipulation." "I was trying to help," Rachel insisted, but Lisa was too stubborn, too convinced that she deserved something better than what she had with you. So I had to try a different approach. The way Rachel said it made David's blood run cold. What kind of different approach? Rachel was quiet for a moment, like she was deciding how much to tell him. Finally, she spoke. "Sometimes people need a little push to appreciate what they have. Sometimes they need to see what life looks like without the person they're taking for granted." "Rachel, what did you do?" She smiled, and for the first time since she had appeared in his doorway, David saw something genuinely frightening in her expression. "I helped Lisa understand that maybe you weren't the problem in your marriage. Maybe she was." David's hands were shaking now. "How?" "Well, for starters, I made sure she knew about all the times other women showed interest in you. That woman at the coffee shop who always smiled when she saw you, I made sure Lisa noticed. The neighbor who asked you to help her move furniture, I mentioned to Lisa how pretty she was and how grateful she seemed." David remembered those incidents. Lisa had gotten upset both times, accusing him of flirting and being inappropriate. He had been confused by her reactions because he thought he was just being friendly and helpful. "You made Lisa think I was cheating," David said slowly. "Not cheating," Rachel corrected. "Just that you had options. That other women found you attractive and interesting in ways that she had stopped appreciating." "That's sick." Rachel stood up from the chair and walked to his window, looking out at the building where she had been watching him. "It worked for a while. Lisa started paying more attention to you, trying harder to be the wife she thought you wanted. Remember that month when she was suddenly interested in cooking your favorite meals and planning date nights?" David did remember. It had been confusing at the time because Lisa had seemed almost desperate to please him, like she was competing with someone. He had thought she was just going through a phase of wanting to improve their marriage. But then she started resenting the effort, Rachel continued. She started feeling like she shouldn't have to try so hard to keep her own husband interested. She started thinking that if you were the right person for her, it wouldn't feel like work. The pieces were starting to come together in David's mind, and the picture they formed was horrifying. "You destroyed my marriage." "I tried to save it first," Rachel said defensively. "But when I realized that Lisa was never going to appreciate you the way you deserved, I had to make a different choice." "What choice?" Rachel turned away from the window and looked directly at him. "I decided that if Lisa wasn't going to fight for you, maybe she didn't deserve to have you at all." David felt like he couldn't breathe. What did you do? Little things at first. I would mention to Lisa when you seemed distant or distracted. I would point out when you forgot to do something she asked. I would ask her questions that made her doubt whether you were really happy in the marriage. Rachel began pacing around his small apartment, her energy becoming more intense as she talked. I would suggest that maybe you were thinking about leaving her. That maybe you were already planning your exit strategy. I planted seeds of doubt and then watched them grow. You manipulated her into thinking I wanted a divorce, David said. I helped her see the truth, Rachel corrected. That you two weren't right for each other. That she was holding you back from becoming the person you were meant to be. David sank down onto his bed, overwhelmed by what he was hearing. His marriage hadn't failed because of normal relationship problems. It had been systematically destroyed by someone who claimed to care about him. Why? David asked. Why would you do that to your own sister? Rachel stopped pacing and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Because I love you, David. I've loved you since the first time Lisa brought you home for dinner. I've loved you through your entire marriage, watching you waste yourself on someone who never really saw you. The room felt like it was spinning. David realized that everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his divorce, and his relationship with Lisa's family had been a lie. Rachel had been pulling the strings the entire time, manipulating both him and Lisa like they were characters in some twisted story she was writing. You're insane, David whispered. I'm in love, Rachel said simply. And now that Lisa is out of the picture, we can finally be together the way we were always meant to be. David looked at Rachel standing in his apartment, surrounded by his personal belongings that she had been going through for months, and realized that his nightmare was just beginning. David stared at Rachel in complete shock. The woman standing in his apartment was not the person he thought he knew. This wasn't Lisa's quirky younger sister who made uncomfortable jokes at family dinners. This was someone who had spent months, maybe years, carefully destroying his life so she could have him for herself. We were never meant to be together, Rachel, David said, trying to keep his voice calm. You're Lisa's sister. Your family. This is all wrong. Rachel's expression changed, and for a moment David saw something dangerous flash in her eyes. Family? She laughed bitterly. Lisa never treated you like family. She treated you like a project she got tired of working on. She moved closer to his bed where he was sitting, and David instinctively scooted backward. But I see you, David. I know who you really are. I know you like your coffee black in the morning, but with cream in the afternoon. I know you worry about your mother living alone since your dad died. I know you still have dreams about becoming a musician, but you're too practical to try. Every detail she mentioned was correct, and that made it even more frightening. Rachel had been studying him like a scientist studying a lab specimen, learning everything about his habits, his fears, his secret hopes. That's not love, Rachel, David said. That's obsession. Don't tell me what I feel, Rachel snapped, her calm mask slipping completely. I've spent 3 years watching Lisa take you for granted. 3 years listening to her complain about how you're not exciting enough, not ambitious enough, not whatever enough. And the whole time I was thinking about how perfect you were exactly as you are. Rachel sat down on the edge of his bed, close enough that David could smell her perfume. It was the same scent she always wore, something flowery and expensive that had seemed pleasant at family gatherings but now made his stomach turn. I know you felt something for me too, Rachel continued, her voice becoming softer and more persuasive. I could see it in the way you looked at me sometimes. During holiday dinners when Lisa was being difficult, you would catch my eye and we'd share a moment. A understanding that she couldn't give you what you needed. David remembered those moments, but they had been nothing like what Rachel was describing. He had looked to her for support during family arguments because she seemed like the most reasonable person in the room, not because he had romantic feelings for her. Those weren't romantic moments, Rachel, David said firmly. You were Lisa's sister. I was trying to be friendly with my wife's family. You're lying to yourself, Rachel said, reaching out to touch his arm. You know there was something special between us. David jerked his arm away and stood up quickly. There was nothing between us. And even if there had been, what you did was unforgivable. You destroyed my marriage. You manipulated both me and Lisa. You've been stalking me for months. Rachel's face hardened again. I saved you from a woman who didn't appreciate you. I freed you from a marriage that was making you miserable. And I've been taking care of you ever since, making sure you're okay during this difficult transition. Taking care of me? David's voice rose. You call breaking into my apartment and watching me through my windows taking care of me? I call it love, Rachel said, standing up to face him. Real love. The kind Lisa never gave you. David realized he needed to get Rachel out of his apartment before this situation escalated any further. She was clearly unstable, and being alone with her was dangerous. Rachel, I want you to leave, David said, moving toward the door. Right now. And I want you to give me back that key and promise never to come here again. But Rachel didn't move toward the door. Instead, she crossed her arms and smiled that unsettling smile again. I'm not going anywhere, David. We belong together now. Lisa is gone, and there's nothing stopping us from being happy. I don't want to be with you, David said as clearly as he could. I will never want to be with you. What you've done is sick and wrong, and I want you out of my life completely. For the first time since she had appeared in his doorway, Rachel looked genuinely surprised, like the possibility that David might reject her had never occurred to her. You don't mean that, she said. You're just confused because everything is so new. Once you have time to process what I've told you, you'll understand that I did this for us. I mean every word, David said. He grabbed his phone from the desk and held it up. I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now. Rachel's expression turned cold and calculating. Go ahead and call them. Tell them what? That your ex-sister-in-law came to check on you? That she has a key your ex-wife gave her? They'll think it's a family dispute and tell us to work it out ourselves. David realized she was probably right. Without evidence of the stalking and break-ins, it would be her word against his, and Rachel was smart enough to have covered her tracks. But if you call the police, Rachel continued, I'll have to tell them some very interesting things about you. Like how you've been struggling with depression since your divorce, how you've been drinking alone and talking to yourself, how you've been sending late-night text messages to your ex-wife begging her to take you back. I never sent Lisa any text messages, David said. Rachel smiled. I know, but I have Lisa's old phone, the one she threw away when she upgraded last month. It would be very easy to create some fake message threads that make you look unstable and obsessive. David felt trapped. Rachel had thought this through much more carefully than he had realized. She had been planning this confrontation for a long time. What do you want from me? David asked. I want you to give us a chance, Rachel said, her voice becoming gentle again. I want you to let me show you how good we could be together. I want you to stop fighting what you know is right. David looked at Rachel standing in his apartment, threatening him and manipulating him while claiming to love him, and something inside him snapped. He was tired of being a victim, tired of letting other people control his life and make decisions for him. No, David said firmly. I'm done with this. I'm done with you, and I'm done being afraid. Before Rachel could respond, David grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I'm leaving, and when I come back, you better be gone. If you're not, I will call the police and I'll take my chances with whatever lies you want to tell them. Rachel called after him as he opened the door. David, wait. You're making a mistake. We're meant to be together. But David was already in the hallway, walking quickly toward the stairs. He could hear Rachel following him, her footsteps echoing in the narrow corridor. This isn't over, Rachel called out as David reached the stairwell. You can't run away from what you feel. You can't run away from me. David didn't look back. He ran down the stairs and out of the building into the cool night air. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe freely. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he had been avoiding for weeks. Hello, Lisa? It's David. I know it's late, but we need to talk about your sister. There are things you need to know. As he walked down the empty street, David realized that his nightmare with Rachel was far from over. But for the first time since his divorce, he felt strong enough to fight back.